In this video, we're going to be looking at labor productivity as a determinant of economic growth. We're just going to spend a little bit more time on this compared to the other determinants of growth because it fuels about 2/3 of the annual growth in the United States. So labor productivity has to do with how much stuff is being produced per person or per hour of work. So a nation's production depends on how many hours are actually being worked and how productive workers are during those hours. Real GDP is a function of the number of hours of work times labor productivity. So hours, this is you work an 8-hour day. Your labor productivity is how much stuff you produced. If you work in a hat factory, you made 100 hats, you worked 10 hours that day, then your productivity is, 10 hats per hour. And real GDP is going to be a function of that. So we're going to take all of the stuff that's produced in the economy times the number of hours of work, and that's going to tell us that value of real GDP. Productivity growth is important because it's linked with real output and real wages. So we have a difference between nominal wages and real wages. Nominal wages, this is just the stated amount, the amount you earn. So in Pasadena, if we have minimum wage of $15.50 per hour, that's the nominal wage. The real wage is going to be how much stuff can you buy, right? How much can you buy? And let's say we have a simple economy. So we have 3 people in this economy, and we're producing 3 things. So our first person is producing 10 fish per day. Our second person is producing 20 mangoes per day. And our third person is producing 15 hats per day. And let's say in this economy, they have figured out a system of currency so that they don't have to barter. And so they have some sort of function. Everybody has some amount of money. So we're going to say our first person has $200. Our second person has $150. And our third person has $100 per day. So this is their nominal wage. It's based on whatever random currency they decided. And it doesn't matter what it is. So it could be multiply all of this by 10, right? 2,000, 1,500, 1,000. It doesn't matter, right? It's a nominal wage. Real wage is what it's worth or how much stuff they can buy with that. So when they're looking at these different things that they can purchase, if I have, $1,500, or let's go back to $150. If I have $150, maybe I can buy, I'm going to buy 3 fish, I'm going to buy a hat. If nominal wages increase, that just means we've multiplied the amount of money people made, right? So we can multiply all of these by 10. Everybody has 10 times as much money. But if we're not increasing actual production, we don't have more stuff. So it doesn't matter that everybody has 10 times the amount of currency. We still have 10 fish and 20 mangoes and 15 hats. And so productivity growth is important because we want to have more output. We want to be able to make more stuff and have higher real wages, meaning we can afford to purchase more stuff. So if we've got an increase in real wages of 10 times, because we have a productivity increase, now maybe we have 100 fish and 200 mangoes and 150 hats. And this is an increase in real output or productivity growth. Right? Productivity growth. We can produce more stuff per person, per day, per hour. And that is what's causing our wages to go up. So now I have 10 times as much money. Now I can buy 30 fish instead of 3. Okay, so productivity growth is important because we need real output to increase for real wages to increase. Otherwise, it's just inflation. Labor productivity determines wages and benefits that you earn at a job. Countries with accelerating GDP per capita also usually see increases in employment. So if we have more production per person, it usually means there's more people in our economy working. One of the main drivers of higher labor productivity is increases in human capital. So knowledge, gaining knowledge and skills. It does improve labor productivity and growth, although it's not enough to offset declining employment. So we see in some countries, the number of people in the labor force is actually decreasing. But the amount of improvement from the other people is not enough to offset it. So, for example, let's say we have 3 people and they're all producing fish. So they're all making 15 fish per day. Now we have an increase in productivity, labor productivity. So now everybody can actually produce 20 fish per day. But let's say our third person has exited the market, right? They're not in the labor force anymore. Even though our productivity is increasing, we might be producing less fish than we were before because the number of people leaving is greater than that increase in productivity. And so we need to have other things improve as well. But human capital improvements, labor productivity is one of the main drivers of growth in the US. We do see a lot of fluctuations in growth. There was a resurgence of productivity growth based on innovations in computers and communications, coupled with global capitalism. So innovations are going to make us more productive. We've got some stuff going on with AI, right? Lots of AI development, ChatGPT, and other programs that are going to make people more productive. It's also potentially going to put some people out of work. It might reduce employment in some industries, but in theory, using AI can make people more productive. It could take away some of the duties so that people can focus on other stuff, right? It can increase the amount of output per day. Between 1995 and 2010, the productivity growth in the US was about 2.6% per year, meaning people were producing 2.6% more per hour per day every year for 15 years. Between 1973 and 1995, so the 2 decades prior to that, productivity growth was only 1.5%. And so we see output increasing significantly more in the early 2000s than in 1973 to 1995. This means that real income is going to double every 27 years rather than just every 50 years. So we can use that rule of 72 to see how long it's going to take for income to double. And generally, productivity growth is directly linked with income. And so productivity growth of 2%, 2.6%, means that real income, the amount of stuff you can purchase, is going to double in 27 years. Real productivity growth of 1.5% means it's going to take 50 years to double. So salaries are growing a lot faster in 2010 than they were in 1973. But we do see business cycle fluctuations happening still. Even though we have an average positive growth over time, there are going to be periods with declining growth or declining productivity. Between 1995 and 2010, near the end of that, we had a major recession. Right? Financial crisis, productivity significantly dropped. There was a big recession during that time. After the Great Recession, or in that what we call recovery period, labor productivity grew at a much, much slower rate, only 0.4%. During the COVID pandemic, there was actually really high growth. In April of 2021, productivity growth peaked at 5.4%. That's a huge number, right? It might not sound like it, but when we're talking about how long it's going to take for income to double, it's going to be very fast, right? Much faster than 50 years or 27 years. it's going to double in about 12 or 13 years, right? Significantly faster. In early 2022, there was negative growth. As people started going back to work, the options for remote work were changing. People reduced how much they were producing. Part of one of the things that was fueling growth in 2021 was people were able to do a lot more things remotely. They were able to pick up more hours. The lack of commute was increasing the number of productive hours people could have. 2022, things are starting to open back up. People are going back in person full time and maybe reducing the amount of stuff that they're producing. Here we have a chart showing the United States labor productivity growth from March 1949 to March 2022. So this is looking at the growth rate. Okay, so not just the productivity, but how much it is changing. We see, this is actually just showing June 2019 through March 2022. I don't know why it's not showing the whole thing. Okay, so scratch this. It's not a 1949. It's showing from June of 2019 to March of 2022. Okay, so June 2019, obviously before COVID pandemic hit, we see growth is 1.2, 1%. And then March 2020, April 2020, it's going to drop to 0.06. So basically no growth. It's just sort of staying stagnant. July 2020 goes up to 3.6. October 2020, 4.8. And that high in April of 5.4%. Then we see it start to decline. So we're not getting that growth anymore. People aren't improving their productivity as much. Drops to 2% and then down to 0.1%. Goes back up end of 21 to 1.8. And then in 2022, we now have negative growth. People are being even less productive per hour than they had been in the past. Now, some of that might be because we're producing beyond that production possibility curve, which we can do temporarily, but not permanently without some sort of increase in that production possibility curve. So is the change in productivity permanent or transitionary? If you've got new technology or the implementation of some sort of new technology by businesses, it's much more likely to be more permanent. During the COVID pandemic, we had a lot more change in technology, working remotely, the implementation of Zoom. A lot of those online delivery programs got significantly better. This could permanently improve productivity. If you have high debt levels, this is going to reduce individual and firms' willingness to spend on new investment projects. So how much debt is happening in the economy? This is going to affect whether you have permanent or transitionary productivity changes. Recent products might not add much to GDP because they're free to the user, such as Facebook or YouTube. So maybe the way that we're measuring GDP is not very accurate. If we have a lot more free products or things that don't have a dollar value attached, it may look like a productivity slowdown when really it's just the types of products don't have a dollar value attached. So why was productivity growing during the middle of the pandemic, but slowing and even negative in 2022? I think this is an interesting topic that I highly recommend you looking into, and consider what the productivity rate or growth rate is today. How have things changed? What things became permanent after the pandemic and may have, permanently increased or improved productivity, and what things were just temporary? So with COVID, much of the world temporarily halted economic activity. They participated in self-quarantines. Did this cause a global recession? Not the way that people thought, and certainly not in 2020. There was a decreased demand for services. There were decreased wages, but we saw some firms and industries actually growing significantly. Did things return to business as usual after the pandemic was over? Yes and no. So a lot of things kind of just went back to the way they were, but there were also new expectations about the future. There were changes to leave policies, changes to the healthcare infrastructure. People had increased savings. People developed new hobbies, new passions during the pandemic. People started new businesses. So a lot of things were different and a lot of things were the same. Um, did we have some permanent increases in productivity due to the pandemic? I think yes, but a lot of it also was just transitionary or temporary. So labor productivity is a really important part of economic growth. And economies that want to have more GDP per capita, economies that want to have better standard of living, do want to focus on investing in labor productivity because that increases real output, it increases real wages.